Welcome to the MIT School of Architecture and Planning Metropolitan Warehouse Town Hall webinar. My name is Emily Huang, and Jose Guillermo Frontado and I are co-presidents of the MIT Architecture Alumni Affinity Group. We're proud to be co-hosts of today's program. Before we begin, we first want to take the opportunity to encourage our 5,000 global alumni who are interested in architecture, design, and the built environment to visit our MIT Architecture Alumni website at mitarcha.org. Consider joining our group. You will find many stimulating programs and excellent opportunities to reconnect with old classmates and meet new alumni friends throughout the year. We invite and welcome your participation. Now, because today's program is so exciting and our time is precious, let's get right to it.
We are honored to introduce our webinar moderator, the individual whose vision from the very beginning has in large part driven the redesign and adaptive reuse of the Metropolitan Warehouse, Hashim Sarkis, Dean of the School of Architecture and Planning. Since his appointment as Dean in 2015, Hashim has chartered a bold code of action for the school. Among his accomplishments so far, he has helped launch the Morningside Academy for Design, the Transmedia Storytelling Initiative, the Norman B. Leventhal Center for Advanced Urbanism, MIT Design, our venture accelerator, and the school interdisciplinary design major and minor degrees, and so much more. To house our growing school and continue the school's commitment to excellence, Dean Sarkis envisioned the Met Warehouse as a new hub of design for all of MIT and our global community. He has also overseen a very significant fundraising campaign to make this aspiration a reality. We have been so excited to hear about this project and are thrilled to finally open this conversation to our community. We know you will find this a most compelling story. And now, let's pass the microphone to Dean Sarkis.
Thank you very, very much. Good day to all from all around the world. And thank you to Metarcha for organizing this event about the Metropolitan Warehouse, the new home for our school. From what I understand, this webinar turned out to be one of the largest gatherings of our alumni ever. And if anything, a proof that our alum care as much about MIT's future as about its legacy. At MIT, we do rely on the support of alumni and friends to sustain our commitment to the future. Our fundraising efforts for this project have been roughly 120, that's the goal, 120 million. And so far we have raised 100 million, thanks to the support of alumni and friends. So to all of you, thank you for all the love. We love you too. This project is obviously about the future. It is about transforming our school. For one, it is increasing our space by 50%. Demographically, we're growing by 0%. And the space will be dedicated primarily to research, to making, and to public spaces. The growth of our research capacities has been really one of the main ways for us to increase our impact on the world, to make stronger connections with MIT and its culture, and also to increase tuition support to what is this year a minimum of 80% to every graduate student. This also strengthens our diversity as a community, attracting students from all backgrounds and walks of life. It also strengthens the ability of our graduates to experiment and to be bold in charting their career paths. This project is also about consolidation. It is bringing the Department of Architecture together, but also together with the design and research units of the Department of Urban Studies, with the Center for Real Estate, the Leventhal Center, and now with the Morningside Academy for Design, about which you will hear later. And it is creating one of the largest academic design hubs in the world. The project is also about our visibility and connectivity with the world. It is bringing what we do to the world and bringing the world into the school and to MIT. This project is finally about our commitment to sustainability. The most forward-looking school of architecture in the world is housed now, or will be soon, in an adaptive reuse project. But beyond our school, this project is about transforming MIT. It's about the future of MIT. It is about transforming MIT education. The creation of the Morningside Academy for Design is really meant to infuse MIT undergraduate and graduate education with design making, design thinking, to complement the world-renowned analytic and quantitative strengths of our students with synthetic, creative, and qualitative skills, to graduate more all-rounded students ready for this world. This project is also about transforming the MIT campus. The campus is quickly becoming urban, and with Vassar Street and Mass Ave as being its main axes. Moving the school to the intersection of these two axes will help recenter the whole campus and to consolidate the western and eastern sides of the campus and its northern and southern sides. To help us imagine and execute this future, this new center, we've been very lucky to partner with Diller Scofidio and Renfro and with Lear Weinzappel in Boston. We're also very lucky to have Liz Diller lead this project and to bring her own design ingenuity and her deep knowledge of architecture and design education to this project. So without further ado, Liz, you have the stage.
Thank you, Hashim. It's really a pleasure to start the presentation to you. I'm going to share this with Ben Gilmartin. And Ben, if you wouldn't mind just getting the PowerPoint up. I want to, maybe just say a couple of words about, I am an educator myself in a competing institution at Princeton University. For me, this is a very personal project to really think about the future of architectural education and how meaningful space making is to it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview and then turn it over to my partner, Ben Gilmartin. So we are now in our 5th year. You can show the first slide. In our 5th year of the project, we just completed construction documents last month. This is the building. So for those of you new to the project, the Metropolitan Warehouse is a storage facility. It was built in 5 distinct sections between 1894 and 1911, with a little sandwich shop that was added on Mass Ave in 1923. The building is about 500 feet long and 90 feet wide. It's really, really, really long and big. And this fortress-like character, that is the crenellated and corbelled cornice and the slit windows at the top, all are there to make it. It was purpose-built to communicate safety and security for the storage of stuff like furniture and books. Next. So as, next slide, Ben. Yeah, so as Hashim mentioned, it's sited right in the middle of campus. The prominent location on Mass Ave and Vassar will give the school a very, very strong presence, and right in the middle, with a visible address. And this is really sort of the gathering place for all of these various departments, labs, and centers of the SA+P that are scattered all over, really now into one very dynamic state-of-the-art educational community resource. I want to show this section next and just show you the character of this building and the challenges that there are, but also the great assets. So the building is very robust. It's almost an infrastructural cross-section. And it has very distinctive masonry and steel hybrid construction. It's got a very tight column grid. It's got low floor-to-floor heights, and there are very small cellular structures through the building, which gives it a very high load-bearing capacity. Next slide. The side walls are 2 feet thick, and this makes it really a great challenge for adaptive reuse for an academic building. So this warehouse was, was designed for storing books and furniture and pianos, but not humans. So chairs and tables don't require natural light or fresh air, but humans do. So go to the next slide. And these tiny little windows, you see the arched brick arch ceilings, which are really quite interesting. But the little windows are very, very tiny, and really we have to operate on this building to make it work as an educational facility. So the effort has been to align the pedagogical goals of the school with this pretty unlikely host. Next slide. And here, just to reinforce, on the southern side of the building, you can see these are the very small windows that don't bring much light in. So next slide. So for the project, we take our inspiration from Gordon Matta Clark, and the way that he fantastically cut large openings into buildings for very different reasons than why we're doing it. But this kind of sort of cutting into the existing fabric exposes the building itself and becomes a kind of pedagogical tool. It reveals its construction, but it also helps to create space and bring in light. Next. And because of the building's historical significance, the Cambridge Historical Commission asked us to largely preserve the Vassar and Mass Ave facades and be very sensitive to preserving the building's character-defining fortress-like appearance. So it is slightly paradoxical, but it leads to a lot of wonderful opportunities, like here, this kind of surgical cutting into the brick to bring a window closer to where someone can really look through it, and wider, but where we could show actually how the loading of the cutaway brick is then distributed through a steel frame, and the window sill sits on that frame, and so forth. So this becomes kind of a great pedagogical opportunity. Next. And this is, ironically, that's the southern side of the building where all the sun is. So on the northern side, we have much more freedom to cut away more. And what we're doing is to cut away large sections at a different scale. These large interventions will allow us to sort of preserve the fabric of the existing building, the cellular fabric for some of the programs of the school, but also to allow large, uninterrupted, sort of tower-like, next slide, tower-like suspended studios that are state-of-the-art to really be suspended from the structural brick. And these are column-free and will support lots of loading as well. Next. But very airy, open, and open to light. There's always a kind of slot of space, very big on detail on this project, to always articulate the difference between the new and the old buildings. Next. So maybe I'm going to end here and just show this. The project is really very much, in the making, right on site as we speak. And because we have a pedagogical mission also on the site, we are cutting and exposing that. This just shows you an experiment. We wanted to make sure that these mock-ups, basically mock-ups in reverse, maybe mock-downs, to test the literal cutting of the building. And so far, the building is holding together as expected, revealing some beautiful cross sections, which we mean to expose and not smooth over. So we believe that that the new Met warehouse should be as much an instrument of education as it is, as the curriculum is. And to take this the next step, I want to introduce Ben Gilmartin, who's going to take you deep into the building. Ben is my partner and has been leading the day-to-day efforts of this transformation. Thank you all.
Thanks, Liz. Oops. Okay, so I'll go through a detailed walkthrough of the building design as it is today. Obviously, it's still a work in progress, but construction's going on site. I'll elaborate some of the points that Liz has made and then talk about the spaces throughout the building. So just reeling back one more time to the history of the building, it's pretty interesting because when it was built, it was on the Charles River, and almost all of the Institute as it is today is on landfill that's filled in between the river and the building. So it was looking across the Back Bay and advertising itself to people in Boston to come over and use it when they did the grand tour of Europe and other things. As Liz mentioned, it was built in 5 stages successively, the first one by Fred Pope, and then subsequently by Peabody and Stearns over about a 25-year period. And it has a length of about 530 feet by 90 feet wide. So it is quite a massive building. The stages or additions of the building are very significant to our design. It has a very prominent, or its primary entrance is on Mass Avenue, and it has secondary entrances along Vassar Street that correlate to the main lobby, to Project Manus and to the Morningside Academy, among other uses. If you take a kind of diagrammatic cut through the building, like a section from east to west with Mass Avenue on the left, this is a diagram that simply shows the program stacking in the building as it is today. So you see the 5 building additions on the bottom. And the yellow spaces at the east end show the entry lobby, the commons, in building 2, the auditorium, and at the lower levels, continuing on Project Manus and loading areas at the lower levels. Going up from there, the shop spaces in the west end of the building. At the upper levels, bookending the building in Building 1 and in Building 5. In Building 1 would be supplementary desk spaces and administrative spaces along Mass Avenue. And in Building 5, the new Morningside Academy in the upper floors. And then all the spaces in the middle upper floors are principally the Department of Architecture spaces. And in the heart of the building is what we call the mixer. It's a convening space for the whole entire community of people using the building. There's a sort of diagonal connector that connects across all the buildings, which is a grand stair that traverses the building. As Liz mentioned, that the primary facades of historic importance are the Mass Avenue and Vassar Street facades, and we had to work very surgically on those facades. So here's a representation of the Mass Avenue exposure of the building. We retained the portico in front and restored much of the historic detail of the facade. But behind the portico, we undercut the building to create transparency through from the street right into the lobby as a kind of layered invitation right into the building for the public. And a blade canopy emerges from the entrance doors and comes and lodges into the spring points of the arch, the second arch from the south, signifying the entrance to the building. Liz also mentioned the kind of surgical approach to introducing new fenestration to the southern facade along Vassar Street. Principally at the street level, we're restoring the historic detailing and windows there, but to introduce new entrances, We're simply introducing them at points of entry that already exist with glass apertures. As Liz mentioned, the existing array of windows is too far apart and too high for the contemporary use of offices, say faculty offices or other teaching and support spaces. And so again, that created the need for an array of contemporary windows that related to the office bay spacing. We picked up detailing at the cornice and sort of used it as our regulating grid on the facade. But that array of windows interacting with the historic punched openings on this facade created the interlock window details, and the sill height of the new window is at the work surface height, and the historic window is high in the space. So that created the expression of the facade, which we think is subtle, but it talks very much about the relation between the contemporary and the historic as the building moves to its new use. Again, along the street, a lot of the traditional details are restored, but at the entry points, new glass infill is created to kind of draw the public in, to create an invitation to the street. And there you see the view from Mass Avenue and Vassar Street. So very subtly transformed, but in a way that we think is quite inventive and speaking to its contemporary use. As Liz also mentioned, the historic structure within has a high density of columns, and the arched structure creates low clearances within, quite a robust capacity for supporting loads and things like that. But our gesture of cutting out from the north a significant portion within the floor plate enables the insertion of the new platforms that provide studio space, double height studio spaces. And the interaction between the existing and new is separated by a skylight overhead that brings daylight down from the south, and the north is a full curtain wall exposure of north light. This is just showing a three-dimensional view of that approach to the insertion of the new trays, which are indicated as yellow platforms within the fabric of more cellular, smaller support spaces, with the curtain wall facing us to the north. And that to us creates a kind of vertical neighborhood that repeats throughout the building in variation. And Liz showed these cuts that are being tested and undertaken throughout the building as the demolition is occurring. Again, a means of revealing the technology of the day and the construction of the building historically as part of its expression within. She also showed the new insertion of the platforms as hanging structures, so that there are heavy beams that span across the roof and bear on the existing columns and perimeter structure of the existing buildings, and then very delicately hang from the top to create these airy double height labs and studio spaces. At the ground floor, there is a continuous corridor that takes its inspiration from the infinite corridor as a kind of extension of that idea to the south through this building. And that would connect all of the public spaces at the ground floor. The diagonal stair that we're indicating here in yellow with a kind of red dashed line is the sort of slow connector through the building that students and faculty would use to traverse the building's levels. And then there are cores at building 1 and building 4, 5 that form fast ways up and down to get to all the levels of the building quickly. And this is just an elevation of the northern facade of the building. Also hung from the top are true curtain walls, steel and glass curtain walls with large glass panels that create a lot of open views to the north. The curtain walls encapsulate the large cuts that we're making, which are not being altered in any way once they're cut, but wouldn't stand up to the weather if they were exposed to the weather themselves. So the cuts are contained within the curtain wall to the north. At the auditorium space in building 2 there, you see a V cut, which is a special cut that actually follows the seating rig of the auditorium inside, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So this is just a northern view of the building as you would approach it on Mass Avenue coming from the north across the Grand Junction. So going through the plans at the ground floor, Mass Avenue on the right with the large red arrow is the primary entrance coming into the central lobby or the main lobby. And this is a very public space that greets everybody from the Institute and the public. It's a convening space for everybody who uses the building. And organized at the ground floor along a kind of main street or an extension of the Infinite Corridor are the lobby, the auditorium, and two building bays of Project Manus space, and then the entrance to the Design Academy to the west. And you see secondary entrances along Vassar Street to each of those spaces. This is just an enlargement of the lobby area, showing where we are in terms of thinking about this as a space. It's a space that's really trying to do a lot of things, that it really wants to host an incredible number of activities and to be a kind of a place where everybody gathers throughout the year for many different reasons. At the heart of it is a very flexible space that can be a hangout, but also a place of exhibition or presentation, a place for community convening or gatherings. It's activated by art gallery to the south, a cafe to the east that opens also out into the portico space, and a library outpost to the north with a reading area. And this is just a notional representation of that space in progress in a day-to-day kind of use, but just the feeling of it as being a space that's very comfortable, that's bright, that's very informal and engaging and inviting, that typically is a place to hang out, but it could also alternatively serve exhibitions or even pinups and presentations. It also has projection and AV equipment to stage simulcasts of lectures or projected events, community engagement functions. In building 2 is the auditorium space as you continue along the corridor. And there's a large window or basically at the presentation side that can be blacked out for media, but it can also be left open and acoustically form a barrier, but reveal the activities that are going on inside. You see the grand stair on the left, which throughout the building we express as a kind of cold rolled steel member that simply tips and falls into place. Very elemental, and its impression here on the auditorium wall creates a subtraction, which is a discrete diagonal window that allows people coming down the stair to peek into the auditorium space with a minimum of distraction to people inside. The wall that I mentioned at the auditorium to the right can also be operated open to open the space up for public to come in, and the seating risers can be retracted to create a flat floor pinup space or use it for events and other functions. So this is just a representation of the auditorium space in a lecture setup. Continuing to the auditorium, you see in building 2 there on the left, continuing along the diagonal stair to the second floor. In building 1 are the administrative spaces, the dean's suite, the upper floor of the auditorium and collab. At the heart of the building, it's called Review, but it's the mixer space. And then going to buildings 4 and 5, the shop spaces, including the high bay shop. So this is just a representation at the 3rd floor overlooking the mixer space at the heart of the building, a very active space at the center of the community within that is a place where pinups and reviews can occur. It's flanked by classroom spaces, and at the upper level has sort of informal convening areas as well as faculty offices. And it at the upper level forms the address for the architecture headquarters. This is jumping over into the high bay space, which is a very large volume space in the shops area for large assemblies and projects. And then the 3rd floor from east to west has DUSP and CRE studio spaces MARC Studios in building 2 with some DUSP research, architecture research in classrooms. In building 4 is architecture headquarters with a small presence, as I mentioned, in the 3rd floor of the mixer area. And in building 5, you see the beginning of the Morningside Design Academy. This is its sort of primary entrance point within the building. And it includes design major and minor, Design Academy offices, and Design X. This is just a detail at the MARC studio spaces where you see that glass joint that Liz talked about between studio, the new structures, and the historic structures, a daylight gap that runs all the way through the building and expresses a separation between new and old, their interaction with each other. At the 4th floor, in building 1 to the east is Sensible City Research Lab, AgaCon, History, Theory, and Criticism departments. In the heart of the building, in buildings 3 and 4 are the primary MARC studio spaces at this level, and the A+U faculty. And then in building 5 at the Morningside Academy would be the architecture undergraduate studio spaces. And this is in building 3 or in building 4, the MARC studio space. As you're ascending the grand stair, looking across the studios, notionally, I think the furniture will ultimately be different than this, but you get the feeling of the energy and messiness and kind of creative vibrancy of these spaces. And at the 5th floor, again at the east, LCAU, which is the Leventhal Center, DUSP Research Studios, in building 2, City Innovation Lab and SMARCS, and additional architecture research spaces, MARC thesis spaces, and in building 5, computation and building technology. And finally, to make fenestration in the west elevation of the building, we use another form of cutting, which is coring. In addition to a large cut that goes from top to bottom of this facade, extending the skylight that runs through the building down to the street level and making a secondary entrance at this approach. The boring holes create daylight apertures in this facade, placed where they're required programmatically for each level of the building going up. This just shows our impression of those bore holes where one of the corings is retained as a ottoman next to the window. And finally, looking at the Morningside Academy, this is something we're really excited about. It's something that came into the project in about the last year or so. And this is looking at the 3rd floor, as I mentioned, a kind of enlargement of the entry space for the Design Academy. The design major and minor studio spaces, some offices and support areas with Design X to the north, but in the center, a convening space that's a kind of a counterpoint to the main lobby space, smaller, but a space that's highly flexible, that both is a place of convening and coming together, but also a place that can serve lectures or reviews. And this is just showing an impression of that. It's a 3-story tall coring through the middle of the building that brings all of the levels together. And it has a 3-story, in addition to AV pinup space, furniture and projections, a curtain that is an acoustic and daylight enclosure that can be opened or closed to create effectively a classroom or a presentation space. So that's largely my overview of where we are with the design of the building. I just wanted to leave with one last coda, I guess. There was a sketch that I did with our submission before we were selected for the project. And it really is just a kind of reflection on the aspiration of the building to work at many, many scales. So I'm sort of reimagining the meaning of the sketch, but beginning with the brick as something that has embodied carbon, but also an embodied piece of history to it. The building, a kind of radical proposition that the future of design is embodied by a building that's an adaptive reuse and not a new tabula rasa building, that within the campus triangle of the future, this building sits squarely in the middle and invites everybody in to participate in the idea of design and across disciplines, design collaboration. At the scale of the city, Cambridge and the city are invited in as real participants in the work that happens in this building collaboratively, as a true engager of real problems in the world. And ultimately, the research that goes on inside, the vastly expanded amount of research space available here, in addition to the Morningside Academy, making it a global leader in thinking about the art and science of design in the global community of institutions that are engaged in these activities. So that's our design overview. I'll hand over to Nicholas de Monchaux, the head of the department. Thank you.
Nicholas, you're muted.
You think I would have learned how to use Zoom now, especially since I started this job June 1st, 2020, at the very beginning of the pandemic, but apparently that hasn't happened. It is a real pleasure to be here with so many of our alumni today. Because I started during the pandemic, I haven't had a chance yet, both as head and here at MIT, I haven't had a chance yet to meet as many of you as I would like, but it's a particular pleasure to meet over architecture and around the idea of architecture. And this, work together, a kind of collaboration, is also particularly enjoyable to me for two reasons. It's been amazing to collaborate with all my new friends and colleagues here at MIT and in the department on how to best live our values in the design of this building. And it's also been a real pleasure to collaborate with Diller Scofidio and Renfro, where I spent an influential part of my own career a couple of decades ago. And so it's a kind of return in that sense too, to architecture and its possibilities in this place. The most enjoyable part of this process, and especially our alumni who are architects will understand this, is nothing uncracks the kind of nature of things, the nature of an organization, the nature of a community, like building for it and building around it. And so for me, this project has been a way not just to imagine a future for the department and the school, but as a way to really not just understand its presence, but create its presence and really arrive at our shared values at this point in time as a department through the envisioning of this building. And just to give you a few examples of how that plays out, one of the most important values of our department at the moment is to engage with the world, to be inclusive of the world, and to include ourselves in the world as agents and change makers, as this moment in history particularly demands. And so the building, with its street level frontage, with its open access to the community in Cambridge and to the larger public, and with its opportunities for exhibitions, is really a quintessential expression of this and a tool in this, not just to allow the community in as we need to, but also through the capacity for introducing end of year and end of semester shows to really show everyone what we're up to and really center the department on its relationship to the world. Another really important value at the moment is architecture's enormous role in both the causes of and the solutions around the effects of the climate crisis on communities in our built environment. So not just embodied literally in the idea of adaptive reuse, which will be an increasingly important critical and pedagogical tool for us, but also the idea of the department as a kind of living laboratory of climate ideas. We didn't have a chance to talk about this yet in the presentation, but we have developed with both the consultants and the architects, for example, a completely new and at MIT untested idea of actually cooling the building with the waste heat from the campus to chilled water return, which happens to come right underneath us on its way back to the central cooling plan. And as a result, kind of finding all of the opportunities to be both innovative and adaptive in our responses to climate, even locally in the space of the building. a kind of final important value of the department as it's expressed in the building at the moment is really at a moment when the extraction of resources and the problems we're facing in the world demand creative design solutions, and in a way demand that all of us become designers, not just those of us trained as architects. We see a crucial role for ourselves as the design department that's been present at MIT since its beginning in 1861 to bring the language and problem-solving tools of design to the whole campus. And of course, our partner in this is the Morningside Academy of Design, and almost all of our spaces are overlapping with the Academy where we intersect. And it's a really deep and even so far enormously productive collaboration. And so bringing the idea of learning by doing and creative problem solving, not just to the professional education of architects or an understanding of its history and possibilities, but to the MIT campus and larger world as a whole is a very important part of where we are, and the building is an essential tool for doing that. So with that, I'll introduce a recording from our roving ambassador of design, who's roving so far. He's not able to be with us today, but my valued colleague, John Oxendorf, professor of architecture and civil engineering and director of the inaugural director of the Morningside Academy for Design.
Hello, it's great to be with you all, friends and former students from all over the world. And it's my wonderful privilege to tell you a bit more about the Morningside Academy for Design and our location in the renovated Metropolitan Warehouse. So first, as many of you have probably followed, just over a year ago on Pi Day, we announced to the world the creation of a new entity at MIT to elevate design, not just at MIT, but around the world. And of course, we have longstanding strengths in design across all of MIT, but in a task force set up in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic, we brought together leading design faculty members from all over the Institute and came out with a clear vision for what we could do to elevate and connect design, both for our students and for our faculty, and also to better serve society and all of the challenges that we all see today. And as a result of that, we were thrilled to receive a really transformational gift, a $100 million gift from the Morningside Foundation. And this gift enables us to create an endowment and a really solid foundation to build from to support students and faculty in design. And it also helps to support the new Met Warehouse. And so the Academy will be located in the Met Warehouse, and I'm thrilled to be able to tell you a bit about that today. In terms of our mission, our goal is to help every MIT student be a designer, to have a portfolio, to turn their talents to the world, and to translate their ideas into reality through design. And so we're supporting students, undergraduate students, with a new first-year learning community called Design+. We're collaborating very closely with the Department of Architecture to help expand and strengthen the design minor and design major, which have been massively successful over the last 6 years. And we're also supporting design research, primarily through graduate fellowships as well as research collaborations. And in fact, we'll be now announcing our second cohort of design fellows, MAD fellows, next Wednesday, May 3rd, if you can help us spread that word to the world. And then through outreach public programming and also through design entrepreneurship in collaboration with DesignX, our entrepreneurship accelerator for design ventures, founded also in the school a few years ago. All of these we're helping to bring together and strengthen. In terms of the Met Warehouse, the Design Academy will be located at the west end of the building in Building 5, and will bleed into the Department of Architecture so that we'll have close collaboration with the design minor and major. And also at that end of the building, there will be a lobby and an entrance with a gallery showcasing design innovations from MIT. And the ground floor of the Met includes a substantial maker space coordinated by Project Manus, entity that's overseeing making across MIT. And the Design Academy will be overseeing and working with Project Manus in order to elevate making as an essential part of designing. As you know, Men's at Manus, our students are, of course, designers, but they're also makers and prototypers, and this goes hand in hand with design innovation. And so we really invite all of you to come and to join us as we elevate and strengthen design at MIT. And it's really only a few short months before we open, and you'll be able to see this new landscape and new ecosystem for our students. Our goal is really to put students first and to elevate possibilities for them, and to make sure that the Met is a hub for design for, of course, the School of Architecture and Planning, but also for all of MIT and for the whole world. So you can follow along at design.mit.edu, and we hope you will help us to spread the word. So thank you very much. I should also say I'm joined by my colleague, Marion Cunningham, who's the Associate Director for MAD, and we look forward to welcoming you back to campus. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Burnaby, and I'm a Senior Project Manager in MIT's campus construction team. As you have heard from the previous presenters today, the construction of this building is unique because of the different construction typologies and timelines. It was really important for MIT to engage in a pre-construction effort, as Liz noted, to study design ideas. After the pre-construction effort kicked off, we were able to go into full construction so that the project could learn from the activities and inform the design process going forward. Given the construction being at the corner of Mass Ave and Vassar Street, adjacent to the MBTA train tracks in a large undergraduate residence hall, our coordination with those butters has been critical to the success of the project. Many participated conversations with CHC, Cambridge Historic Commission, state agencies, and local agencies have got us to this point. Some of that engagement has also continued through the construction efforts today, through various mock-ups, submittal reviews, and shop drawings. We began construction in June of 2022, and our anticipated timeline for opening is 2025. Now I'd like to introduce you to Jim Harrington, the Director of Facilities for MIT School of Architecture and Planning. Jim is going to take you on a tour of the construction activities that are presently going on site as of last week, and we look forward to answering your questions after this segment. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Everyone, please enjoy the video. The best and most fun part of my job by far these days is my going to the site and seeing all the activities. So this will give you some of the local color. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Jim Harrington. I'm Facilities Director for the School of Architecture and Planning. After 25 years of working at MIT, I'm finally now and officially in my glory. If you get into architecture because you love construction work, or into real estate development and urban planning because you love watching cities be transformed, this is your project. The Metropolitan Warehouse is being transformed from a repository and a vault for stuff into a place where people can meet, work, and learn. For the first time for passers-by on the street, the change is becoming obvious with the demolition of the north-facing facade here in the first section of the building at the Mass Ave end. The demolition work's being done by Local 151, the laborers. There's a lot of exciting structural work underway in the building right now, so let's go take a look. We're now on the second floor at the west end of the building, or fifth section of the building. Each of the 5 main sections of the building has L-shaped shear walls inserted at all 4 corners. This area has been prepped with rebars set by the Ironworkers Local number 7. You can see the formwork from the floor below, where the shear wall has already been poured. The L-shaped shear walls land on concrete pile caps which is supported by pilings that go straight down to bedrock. The shear walls are formed up by local Carpenters Union 328. My stepfather would have been proud. The ground floor has been completely demolished to reveal the original column structure where it meets the foundation. The original foundation's pyramidal granite slabs that rest on wooden pilings. Above the pilings, there's brick fire safing for the steel columns. And then where the original floor beams have been cut away, it leads to a gnarly situation. We do have a detail for dealing with this, but some of these cases have led to RFIs from the contractors, you can probably imagine. Here you can see our detail for the situation where new floor will meet original column structure. This has already been formed up by the carpenters. And on this side in the corner, you can see a completed pile cap and shear wall. The shear wall formwork was just stripped earlier today, so this is completely fresh. That's the update from the site. There's a lot of activity here, as you saw and heard. More to follow through completion. Special thanks to Shama Construction for hosting us today, and to all the skilled union tradespeople who are working on the job.
Plug the local floor, the operating engineers who are running the Bobcat that were knocking that wall down. And I also want to give out credit to Antonio Chalona, who did the camera work and helped me with the editing. So thanks for that. So this brings us to the question and answer section of the program. And looking through the chat, there's a common thread that runs through several of the questions. I'd like to kick over to the panel, which is about how the historic preservation aspects and relations with the cities were negotiated, and the impact it had on the design. And I think we've heard a lot of talk about some of the obstacles and special problems this project presented. So if the panel could please address how as a team those were all met.
I'll maybe ask Hashim. He was the first person, I think, to reach out to the Historic Commission quite a number of years ago to have an initial conversation about the adaptive reuse of the Met Warehouse building. And then after that meeting, we engaged in years-long discussion. So Hashim, if you could recap that, that would be great.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you everybody for its very, very helpful presentations. Every time I see the project, I see something new. So it's amazing material. All I wanted to say is that the first person we met after MIT said, go ahead and explore this as the new hub for the school was Charlie Sullivan, the director of the Cambridge Historic Commission. And it was a very beautiful first meeting, because from there we established a working relationship, a partnership, where we thought through the problems together. At every stage, we would visit him and his team, and they would visit us and talk through the challenges together. So it was really the beginning of a very beautiful partnership, which continues till today, I know, and that has not just built trust, but helped us understand better the role of that building in Cambridge and how its adaptive reuse is going to be a lesson to be learned for all other owners of historic buildings, and how it is possible to hold on to the historic heritage while imagining better futures.
Go ahead, Ben, please.
I was just going to say, for our part, as the leading the design on the project, Charlie was a very interesting partner. I think that he was not what you would expect from somebody who's dedicated to preservation of historic buildings, because he was quite open to moments of invention like the interlock windows, or the approach to cutting that sort of reveals characteristics of the history of the building and its structure. So the kind of a dialogue of strict preservation or restoration and truly distinctive moves that came out of a dialogue with him, I think brought about a lot of what this project is. And I thought it was somebody who was actually quite open-minded and interested in that dialogue.
And those conversations are still ongoing with the Cambridge Historic Commission staff. MIT has a longstanding partnership with the Historic Commission. It's very important that we maintain our relationship with them and work through the various different scenarios. So as we go through the construction process, We are looking at masonry mock-ups, grout mock-ups, mortar mock-ups, and they are fully participating in that approach. So Jim, I do see a lot of questions on the reuse of materials, so maybe I can just speak to that for a moment. So we have a lot of different materials coming out of this building, as you can imagine, with the volume of brick and steel and concrete. Depending on how the material is classified, it goes to various different either reuse facilities or hazardous waste facilities. So it just depends on the material, how it's been classified and where that material ends up going. We are working with LEED classification for the project. So we are filing all that data for our LEED certification V4 Gold, and that make sure that we are classifying all of that information, keeping track of all the data, and when we're reusing, we're also counting that towards the project.
I'm going to keep answering after the session concludes all of the questions in the chat. So we'll get to them. I'm just trying to cherry pick some questions on a thematic basis that span several individuals. A couple things. One of these come up is people are interested in how beyond the SA+P, this building will engage the broader MIT. And particularly there was one question about the role of design in general in educating MIT students. I think that is the main thrust of the building. If someone could speak to that, that would be great. Perhaps Hashim or Marion.
Well, the Morningside Academy for Design is, or MAD as we call it, has been put together to really bring design to the entire campus, actually beyond the campus. And one of the ways in which we're doing that is working very closely with Project Manus to make making a part of the MIT undergraduate experience through our Design Plus first year learning community, through our design fellowship program, and also by creating an infrastructure that encourages and supports students exploring the making opportunities on campus. In addition, we're working very closely with K through 12 and other organizations that are focused on design throughout the Institute to really highlight and convene the design activities that are taking place, and to really be an amplification of those activities on campus. I should also mention that we're working very closely with the Department of Architecture to really magnify the design minor and major, and to really be a collaborative partner in that area. But I'm sure Hashim can elaborate even further on the role of design in the Metropolitan Warehouse.
I'll let Nicholas complement what you just said from the point of view of architecture, and I will add to that. Nicholas, are you there?
Sure. I would only add to what Marion said, how grateful we are for the collaboration with the Morningside Academy on the undergraduate design programs. These are, for those of you who may not have been at MIT recently, the newest programs of the department at MIT, the fastest growing undergraduate major and minor at MIT, and already the second most popular after computer science, which, if you understand the landscape of MIT today and the ubiquity of computer science, means they're sort of the most popular unique subject in many ways. And we're so, this is both an enormous challenge and responsibility for us as a growth area in our activities. And so the literal synergy or cross-hatching you saw in the section that Ben showed at the beginning is indicative of a kind of beautiful partnership we're developing with the Academy and its new momentum to expand these programs broadly. Hashim?
Yeah. Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks, Marion. In addition, if you can just look at the ground floor, on a daily basis, about 2,000 students will be walking through that 500-meter long infinite corridor extension. As they walk through it, and they're students walking back and forth to their dorms, walking to up to the different units on Vassar, they will encounter design, they will encounter workshops, they will encounter exhibitions, which are open to not just to them, but to the general public. At the corner of Vassar and Massav, in the turret, there will be a room that is called the community room that will be open to the whole community, not just MIT, but to the Cambridge community. So imagine that the Historic Commission would want to have a hearing about a project. They can host it there. We can have K-12 programs for the Cambridge community also over there. So that openness to the world through the ground floor becoming publicly accessible to everybody is a crucial dimension of the ethos of that building. Additionally, there are many programs in the building that are not departmentally focused. In addition to the Morningside Academy for Design, there's the Center for Real Estate, its studios and research spaces. There's the Leventhal Center for Advanced Urbanism. There's the Mobility Initiative. There's Sensible Cities. There's CoLab, all of which are grandly about collaboration across the campus and with the world. Most of these centers are about interdisciplinary work that involves faculty and students from across MIT. So the building is very much a representation of what MIT Spirit is about: interdisciplinary collaboration and work that is applicable in the world, and the world coming in to be part of that. Additionally, there's also, which is part of the Morningside Academy for Design, the Design Accelerator, which is a place where we're encouraging our students to come up with ideas about their future careers in design and support them financially in terms of the development of the ideas and launching them into the world. So this building is open to the world from the ground floor all the way up to the sky.
Thanks, Hashim. Elizabeth, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Hashim's comment. The ground floor is absolutely an extension of the Infinite Corridor, but in addition, the diagonal spine, which cuts through the building, connects every floor, every space to every other space effectively, really transforms this really solid opaque building into one that's carved open. And so it's open as much as we possibly could without annoying people with too much acoustic leakage. But between openness and the use of glass where necessary, right from the beginning, the connectivity of the building, not only to the labs and departments and everything that's part of the school, but the community at large, the MIT community at large, was a huge priority for Hashim leadership and for the design team.
Thanks, Liz. You reminded me of something which you added to this openness, which is at the end of the cascading infinite corridor that leads all the way up to the roof. We're hoping to build a roof terrace which will be available for the whole community to be able to reach the sky and look over the campus from that vantage point.
Also, I want to mention that we've had quite a few comments in the chat from students, and Chris has come up about how we've been able to engage students on the project. One of my great joys these last several months has been to bringing tours of students through the construction site. We've had several classes in building technology at a workshop that focused on acoustics. They've designed a model and an acoustic model for the building imagining Met as a kind of musical instrument, a bagpipe, pipe organ sort of thing. And that's on display right now in Keller Library, Building 7, Room 408. Go take a look. But we've had so many students through, and I think a lot of people have found it inspirational. It's really been integrated in the teaching, in particular our assemblies class, which studies building envelope and so forth. And also we have developed an intern program with Shawmut Construction, and we just selected one of our first-year MArcs who will be working this summer closely with the contractor at the site, and a great opportunity to learn about construction administration, bidding and RFIs and all the rest. So I think this has been a great opportunity through the construction, and more to come in the next 2 years for engaging students even more.
Yeah, I would only add, Jim, that a couple of weeks ago I gave the introductory speech to our open house for admitted students, and the admitted students at the PhD and MArch level will have half or more of their education in this new building. And we gave them a tour of the construction site and they were very excited by it. But I had another population of two-year research post-professional students in architecture to speak to, whose tenure will just slip out of the window where they'll get to move into the building. But I told them very sincerely that they are the ones who should be most excited about the new building, because it is truly an exciting thing to move a School of Architecture and our department into a new building that represents our values and our imagination about building. But it is an even more exciting thing to have a School of Architecture for 2 years transformed by the process of building. And so the engagement of all of our classes and students in the actual physical process of making the building through, as Jim said, not only many classes, but exhibits, projects on documentation. This is a once in a lifetime learning opportunity for our community, and one that I think our students are particularly excited about.
If I can quote one student who told me after a visit that this is like an anatomy class in a medical school.
There are several questions that touch on sustainability aspects of the project. Perhaps someone on the panel would like to speak to those.
So I'll jump in maybe with some thoughts, and then Ben, I'll kick it over to you. So as Nicholas noted, we are working with kind of a different strategy in terms of our connections to the central utilities plant. We are still connecting to the central utilities plant for our electrical power. We are utilizing the chilled water supply and return in our systems as well. As I noted, that we are seeking LEED V4 Gold for our sustainability, for the LEED rating on the project. And then we are working with things such as red list free materials in certain areas of the project where we can. Obviously, there's a lot of movement in that market presently, and we're working closely with our sustainability consultants on that. Ben?
I think you covered most of the things. I mean, at its heart, the building is obviously by adapting an existing structure, you know, the existing masonry and steel saves the equivalent of at least 3 years of operational carbon compared to a ground up solution. It is conceived and functions as an all electricity facility with no fossil fuel use on site. And as the central plant of the campus decarbonizes, the building fully decarbonizes. So it has that aspect. The triple glazed curtain walls are super high performing insulative glass walls. And as Nicole mentioned, that it's a red list free, building, and it's all of its interior finishes.
I think, Jim, there was a question about one second. Just overriding code issues and approaches for the transformation of the building. So that is a great question. So dealing with an existing structure and a new proposed structure, we've had to work very closely with our subject matter experts from the design team and consulting team so that we could analyze areas. We've also done a lot of mock-ups on site to see where we can achieve the fire ratings, where we might have issues, where we might have to introduce other levels of fire rating to make sure that our project is in compliance. Overall, we did seek a couple variances on the project, specifically for some of the existing conditions that we're dealing with, but we're still intending to meet all of the codes that are applicable here.
There's no question, Nicole, that touched on the Grand Junction project and the idea, the building at a future time integrating with public transportation. Could you just talk about that?
Yes, so I am also working on the Grand Junction multi-use path project as one of our liaisons from MIT, working with the city of Cambridge. For those that are unfamiliar with the project, I will pop a link into the chat so that you can see about it. But the city of Cambridge and MIT have been working for many years on a Grand Junction multi-use path that's intended to connect Somerville to Cambridge and then over to Boston. So there are multiple phases as part of that project. We have been working with that team just to coordinate efforts on what's happening at the corner of Mass Ave and Vassar Street, the crossing, and then the adjacent Grand Junction Railroad. For those that are familiar with campus, the Grand Junction Railroad is north of the Metropolitan Warehouse building. On the north side of the train tracks, there is a planned pathway that's going to run through the middle of our campus and introduce a whole bunch of pedestrians and cyclist access to the adjacent area.
A few questions here about tours of the building. So during the school year, I've been focused on our current students. Considering potentially opening up to alumni, and I have to say, I can't tell you how grateful we all are to the alumni. I mean, this is your building too. So I'm going to work with the alumni office, and we'll see about potentially running a few tours over the summer. So look for information about that. There's probably a lot of interest to the level we might have to run a lottery, and we're trying to run a productive work site, and there's liability and safety issues, so you can't run it as a tourist attraction. But we're absolutely interested in sharing the exciting things that are going on at the site beyond current students and faculty. So I would say look for that.
And Jim, there is a great question about the structure and how it is working. So Ben, I'd like to kick this question over to you, but it's talking about the new structure with the floating studio trays. Is it completely supported by the existing structure? Was it necessary to introduce new structural elements?
Funny you ask. I think that we didn't really lean into that too much in the presentation, but as robust as the building looks, it effectively has no contemporary lateral structural capacity. So if there was an earthquake, the building would fall off of its foundation and collapse. And so from the top to the bottom, the building has to be, and the reason it doesn't have any lateral capacity is that the original structure bears on granite slabs that sit on wood pilings that are drilled into the swamp that was, below the building when it was made. So we have to go in and create, as Jim mentioned, new piles that go all the way down to bedrock below hundreds of feet, and tie together the entire foundation system. We have to introduce new composite shear walls, which is actually an idea conceived by John Oxendorf with our structural engineers at Silman. That is a kind of lamination of concrete onto the corner walls within the building, and uses the brick and the concrete together to create stiffening for the building. We have to pour all new topping slabs on the slabs and tile the slabs together laterally within the existing structure, so that it has stability and contemporary capacity that's code compliant. The building does have substantial gravity load capacity because it was a warehouse and it was built to support heavy loads. And so the second part of the question about our new structure, with some selective reinforcing of existing columns inside, we're able to, with those long span beams across the roof, bear on existing columns and the structural frame of the building, and hang our entire new studio platforms from the top, simply using the gravity capacity of the existing building once it's been seismically reinforced throughout. So it's a complex, interdependent new structural system that's a composite of new and old structure working together. But it's a very, highly surgical effort to retain all of the existing building and to make all of its existing structure operative in a contemporary sense.
Jim, Nicole, I realize we're getting close to the end of our webinar. I want to turn to the Matarka leadership to thank you very, very much for hosting this event. I also wanted to thank all the speakers and every single attendant, because this has truly been a beautiful moment for all of us to realize how interested you are in where we're going at MIT. We thank you a lot for all of your help, and we invite you to come one, come all, but let us know ahead of time so that, as Jim said, he can organize tours for you.
Thank you, Dean Hashim Sarkis. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. What an inspirational project that truly speaks to the positivity of our future. Congratulations to the whole MIT team for getting us to where we are today. There are over 700 participants today. So if you are an alumni of MIT architecture and have not joined us and enjoyed this program, Jose and I invite you to once again consider joining your Architecture Alumni Association. Become an active member and join our global community. Engage with each other and with the School of Architecture and Planning. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.